Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland, and I'm giving you another video about speaking in public, but particularly about debating, but it applies to oratory in general. So some of the golden rules are to be respectful and to be respectable, so that other people will think that you conduct yourself with decorum and you treat your disputants honourably. It doesn't do any credit to your cause to be sneering at them. That will alienate people who are open-minded, who might be persuaded, think this person is unpleasant, sneering, as I've said, conceited, unduly hostile, and then they'll be just praying for you to take a tumble. Be unfailingly courteous to the chairman or chairwoman. Acknowledge when you don't know things, when you got things wrong. I could be wrong, because if you're too haughty and you're too sure of your views, there might be a flaw in your argument, and someone could expose that and really bring you down. You could really be humiliated like that. So it can be nerve-wracking. I remember the first time I stood up to address the Oxford Union, hundreds of people in the room, and my leg was shaking uncontrollably because I was all nerves. So try to cope with that anxiety, and sometimes I used to look at the floor when I couldn't quite bring myself to face the audience. But I gradually improved through experience. You can build it up, speaking to one person, and then 10, and then 20, and 50, and 100, and gradually it gets easier and easier. And there are those who can speak live to millions and not find a problem. So why are people petrified of speaking in public? Some people are more frightened of that than they are of death. People are watching you, and if you make a mistake, everybody's going to notice. So people are frightened of failure, and I am too. And so when I'm nervous, sometimes like on this channel even, in a sense I'm speaking to nobody. Then I can mispronounce things, I can mangle the grammar. There are two different ways I could say things, and I somehow blend the two, which is ungrammatical. So try not to go for those melanges of saying things. Using fairly short sentences. Don't use unduly complex grammatical structures. Don't necessarily reach for the lengthiest word, the most abstruse word. Your hearers might not know it. On the other hand, it is dull to be always using short, simple, commonly used words, and they tend to be imprecise. So we don't want to be accused of banality. So you're going to gain in self-assurance. How are you going to do that? You might have to fake it to make it. This is performance. You're acting to some extent, even if it's your real personality, even if you're arguing for your real beliefs. You're going to have to fool yourself into being self-confident. And you might eventually trick yourself into actually having self-confidence, because you've been pretending in a sense. That's perhaps not been your true persona, you've been projecting. And in the end, you live up to that act, and you can become that in public. Even very distinguished political figures such as Jeremy Thorpe, now subject of much controversy, he was said to be like that. In private, ordinary, not that remarkable, but then he would put on his public face when he had to address at a meeting. And he was full of bonhomie, he was very affable, witty, self-assured. But I suppose what he was doing is exaggerating certain aspects of his true personality. So project your voice. I'll try and do an example right now, which is slightly raising the volume. Project your voice. And it's not just the volume, but actually just making it carry. Obviously, we'll be standing up to do that. Benazir Bhutto, her highest office was surely president of the Oxford Union. Okay, she was twice president of Pakistan. But she said that once, speak to the back of the room. You can read her autobiography, Daughter of the East, in which she underscores that crucial point. So when you stand, if there's some hubbub in the room, you might pause for a moment, allow that to subside, eyes fall on you, and there's a bit of suspense. What's he going to say? What's he going to say? Whether it's a he or she, and then they're more willing to listen. So don't compete if you can. If they want to cheer, let them cheer, applaud, quieten down. Someone's trying to interrupt you, I think you just need to go on over it louder necessarily, because if you let them in, they're not going to stop. So if there's a lot of interruption, or catcalling, or heckling, and there shouldn't be, you might have to speak very, very fast, don't give them the opportunity to get in. John Prescott used to have to do that years ago, he said, when he was in fractious trades union meetings. You might find it useful to have a rising and a falling tone. Well, I can't quite do Martin Luther King, who'll be doing his rising and falling tone. Something like that. Certainly varies it. You don't want it to be a monotone. Some people stand on their tiptoes to emphasize a point. Well, I'm sitting down at the moment, but Peter Tatchell will do this. having to rise up in my seat a little bit, but he was doing it standing. Or some people tap the podium as they really want to emphasize a point, and it's faintly entertaining to watch. So there are all sorts of ways to make it better. Supposing in a debate somebody makes a point of information, I'll talk more about points of information later, and it's a drone strike. It is a verbal attack so devastating it brooks no comeback, and you're stumped. You just can't think of what to do. So therefore you've got to have some very basic restatement of your fundamental principle. Yeah, but despite all that, smoking should be outlawed, or even taking that into account, smoking must be allowed. Just to go back to the example of what I said. Right, Tony Blair was a past master of this, let's say about the Northern Ireland peace process. Yes, acknowledging all that, however, we must maintain the peace process. Something like that, a one-sentence statement of what your overall line of argument is. And that's the best way you can cope with things, because sometimes I've been caught out and people have made these highly effective attacks on my argument, and I didn't know how to come back. I couldn't counterattack that time. Right, so those are some pointers to improve your debating style, and you'll be the new Demosthenes or Quintilian. That reminds me, don't necessarily be too prolix. I had to judge one debate yonks ago, and they did this in an unusual way. There was 10 minutes for the proposition, 10 minutes for the opposition, but either side of the house could divide it up as they wished. And let's say it's a proposition. The first speaker, he spoke for something ridiculous like 9 minutes, leaving only 1 minute for his colleague later on. Now, this boy, I shan't reveal his surname, Ted, he gave a tremendous speech for the first couple of minutes and had some really worthwhile things to say, and he delivered it with his characteristic panache. But after that it sagged, it became average, and then after that it sagged even further and became dreadful, bland, self-indulgent, attempting wit and failing miserably, repeating himself and being just unnecessarily verbose. So we don't want a lot of hot air. Less is more, and sometimes if you're given a space to fill, you don't have to use the whole time. So long as you've got reasonably good things to say, worthwhile things to say, you could cut it short early. And then he left very little time for his colleague, who gave just a passable speech. But they shouldn't have done that. The 9 minutes for one, only 1 minute for the other, was completely wrong. It might have been 5 minutes, might have been ample for the first guy. Second person, if he had 1 minute's worth of things to say, that was all right, rather than going on. So prolixity is not always a virtue. And the other side, they were just satisfactory. But solely on the basis of the first speaker using up so much time and being so wasteful, like the sound of his own voice too much, I had to award it to the opposition as a judge, and I said that. But again, that's very rare. That's in fact that's the only time I've seen that, when there's been a time allotted to the proposition and they could divide it up as they wish. Usually it's 5 minutes max for each speaker on each side of the house, or let's say 4 minutes max for each speaker on the side of the house. It's not for them to divide up the time between them. Right, that's all for the moment on these few tips to improve your public speaking.